thought I was just imagining things when I first saw her, but by the time the ship docked, I realized I wasn't the only one haunted by her presence. The ocean had always been my escape. Every year I booked a cruise to unwind, lose myself in the vastness of the sea, and forget about life on land. This year was no different, or so I thought. The first evening aboard, I was standing on deck watching the sunset. The water shimmered beneath the golden light, and for a moment, everything was peaceful. Then I saw her. She stood at the ship's railing, alone, staring out at the horizon. Her dress was pale, flowing slightly in the ocean breeze, and her long, dark hair cascaded down her back. Something about her posture seemed wrong. She was too still, like a statue. Most passengers were full of life, laughing, drinking, chatting, but she was completely silent. I brushed it off, thinking maybe she was just lost in thought. As I passed her on my way to the bar, a strange chill swept over me. The warmth of the sun vanished, replaced by an icy cold that clung to my skin. I stopped mid-step and glanced back at her. She hadn't moved. Her back was still turned to me, her gaze fixed on the water. But I could feel something, an overwhelming sense of dread, as though I was being watched by something unseen. I hurried away, shaken but trying to dismiss it as my imagination. After all, people come on cruises to escape reality. Maybe I was just more tired than I thought. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about her. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her standing there at the railing, unmoving. Her figure seemed etched into my mind. I tried to distract myself with the gentle rocking of the ship, but it wasn't enough. The next morning, I went to the dining hall for breakfast. As I walked in, I scanned the room, and my heart skipped a beat. There she was again. This time, she was seated at a small table by the window, staring out at the endless ocean. Her plate was full of untouched food, but she didn't seem interested in eating. Her hands rested on the table, her body completely still. I hesitated, wondering if I should approach her, maybe ask if she was okay. But something held me back. The air around her seemed cold, almost oppressive. I walked past her table, trying to act casual, but as I did, I felt the chill again. That same icy cold I had felt on the deck. It was like stepping into a freezer. A shiver ran down my spine, and I hurried to a table on the other side of the room. I asked one of the waiters about her, hoping for some kind of explanation. "Excuse me," I said. "Do you know the woman sitting by the window? She seems off." The waiter glanced over, then back at me with a puzzled expression. "I don't see anyone there." I turned to look, and my heart dropped. The table was empty. The woman was gone. Confusion swirled in my mind. How could she have disappeared so quickly? I had just seen her there, not even 30 seconds ago. I didn't want to come off as crazy, so I forced a smile and thanked the waiter. But inside, I felt a growing unease. The day passed in a blur. I tried to enjoy the usual cruise activities, sunbathing by the pool, playing a few rounds at the casino. But everywhere I went, I couldn't stop looking over my shoulder. I kept expecting to see her again, lurking just out of sight. And sure enough, that evening, as I wandered the deck before dinner, I saw her again. She was standing in the exact same spot as before, leaning against the railing, staring at the horizon. The air around her seemed to shimmer with an unnatural cold, and once again, I felt that suffocating dread wash over me. This time, I couldn't ignore it. I approached her slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. "Excuse me," I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. "Are you okay?" She didn't respond, didn't even flinch. As I got closer, I could see her more clearly. Her skin was impossibly pale, almost translucent in the fading light. Her eyes, dark, empty voids, stared straight ahead, unblinking. I stopped, frozen in place. Something wasn't right. This woman, she didn't belong here. I stumbled back, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I turned and fled, not caring how crazy I must have looked to the other passengers. All I knew was that I had to get away from her. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face. Those dark, hollow eyes staring into nothingness. I tossed and turned, my mind racing with questions. Who was she? Why did she keep appearing? And why did I feel that suffocating cold every time I was near her? The next morning, I overheard two passengers talking near the pool. They were gossiping about a woman who had gone missing on a cruise several years ago, on this very ship. She had disappeared one night during a storm. Her body never recovered. Some said she had fallen overboard, while others believed something more sinister had happened. A chill ran down my spine as I listened to their conversation. Could it be her? Was she the ghost of the woman who had vanished all those years ago? I tried to shake the thought, but I couldn't. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. The cold, the sense of dread, the way she appeared and disappeared without a trace. It all pointed to something otherworldly. That evening, I returned to the deck where I had first seen her. The sky was overcast, the waves choppier than usual. I stood at the railing, staring out at the dark, endless sea. The wind whipped through my hair, and I shivered, but not from the cold. I could feel her presence, even before I saw her. I turned slowly, my heart racing. She was there, standing just a few feet away. Her hollow eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of emotion cross her face. Pain, sadness, maybe even desperation. "You shouldn't be here," I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I was talking to her or myself. She took a step closer, her pale hand reaching out toward me. "Neither should they," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the wind. Before I could react, she vanished, dissolving into the night like mist. I stumbled back, my mind reeling. What did she mean? Neither should they. The rest of the cruise passed in a haze. I avoided the deck, the dining hall, any place where I might see her again. When we finally docked, I was the first off the ship, eager to leave the haunting presence behind. But as I walked down the gangplank, I couldn't resist one last glance back at the ship. And there she was, standing at the railing watching me leave, her dark, hollow eyes following me as I disappeared into the crowd. There are parts of a ship that passengers aren't supposed to see, and now I wish I hadn't stumbled into the dark secret hiding below deck. I've always loved cruise ships, the sense of freedom, the vastness of the ocean, the feeling that you're floating through a dream. So when my best friend, Emma, suggested we take a 2-week Caribbean cruise, I jumped at the chance. It was supposed to be our escape from the grind of everyday life, a chance to relax, soak up the sun, and drink cocktails by the pool. But that dream quickly turned into a nightmare. It all started on the third night. Emma had gone to bed early, exhausted from a full day of swimming and exploring the ship. I wasn't ready to sleep, though. The night was cool and breezy, and the gentle rocking of the ship against the waves was soothing. I decided to go for a walk, maybe check out one of the late-night bars on board. I wandered through the ship's labyrinth of hallways, passing through the casino, the lounges, and even stopping for a quick drink at the piano bar. As I strolled back toward our cabin, I took a wrong turn and ended up in a part of the ship I didn't recognize. The hallway was narrower, the lights dimmer. There were no passengers here, no sounds of laughter or music. It was unsettlingly quiet. The further I walked, the more disoriented I became. The walls seemed to close in on me, and the air grew colder, heavier. I was about to turn back when I saw a door marked "Crew Only." My curiosity got the better of me. I knew I shouldn't, but something compelled me to see what lay beyond. I hesitated for a moment, glancing around to make sure no one was watching. The hallway was completely empty. I pushed the door open. On the other side was a stairwell that led down into the lower levels of the ship. It smelled damp, the air thick with the scent of metal and sea salt. I should have turned around then and there, but something drew me forward. I descended the stairs, my footsteps echoing against the metal steps. At the bottom, the corridor stretched out in both directions, lit by flickering bulbs. The The walls were grimy, stained with something dark and oily. The ship creaked and groaned around me, and I could hear the faint hum of the engines somewhere in the distance. It was colder here, too, the temperature plummeting the further I ventured in. I wasn't supposed to be here. I knew that. But there was an almost magnetic pull guiding me forward, deeper into the bowels of the ship. As I walked I became aware of a sound, a faint, rhythmic thumping. At first, I thought it was the machinery, the pulse of the engines deep below. But the more I listened, the more I realized it was something else. It sounded organic, like a heartbeat. I stopped, my breath hitching in my throat. The sound was coming from behind a door at the end of the corridor, a heavy metal door that looked like it hadn't been opened in years. My skin prickled with unease, but my feet moved toward the door as if on their own. I reached out, gripping the cold metal handle, and pushed it open with a loud creak. The room beyond was dark, illuminated only by a single bulb swinging from the ceiling. The smell hit me first. Rot, decay, something foul and sour that made my stomach churn. And then I saw it. Huddled in the corner of the room was a figure. At first, I thought it was one of the crew, but as my eyes adjusted to the dim light, I realized it wasn't human. At least, not anymore. The thing was emaciated, its skin pale and waxy, clinging to its bones like wet paper. Its hair was patchy, hanging in greasy clumps from its skull, and its eyes, oh God, its eyes were wide and staring, black as the deepest parts of the ocean. Its mouth hung open, revealing sharp yellow teeth, and it let out a low, guttural moan. I froze, my blood turning to ice. It was staring right at me, its eyes gleaming with a hunger that made my skin crawl. For a moment I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The thing shifted, rising slowly from its crouched position, its joints creaking and popping like rusty hinges. It took a step toward me, its bare feet slapping against the cold metal floor. I stumbled back, my heart racing. I turned and ran, my footsteps echoing through the narrow corridor as I fled. I didn't dare look back, but I could hear it. Its labored breathing, the slow, deliberate thud of its feet as it followed me. I burst through the crew-only door and slammed it shut behind me, gasping for breath. The normal sounds of the ship returned, the hum of the engines, the distant chatter of passengers, the clinking of glasses from the bar down the hall. I leaned against the door, my heart pounding in my chest, trying to convince myself that what I had just seen wasn't real. I made my way back to the cabin, my legs trembling with each step. I wanted to tell Emma, but when I saw her sleeping peacefully, I couldn't bring myself to wake her. How could I explain what had just happened? She'd think I was crazy. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak, every groan of the ship sent my heart racing. I kept hearing that rhythmic thumping, that heartbeat echoing in my mind. The next morning, I decided to report what I had seen to one of the crew members. I didn't mention the thing in the lower decks, just that I had accidentally gone into a restricted area. The crew member, a tall man with a stern expression, listened quietly, but when I finished, he didn't seem surprised. "You're not the first," he said, his voice low. "Passengers, they sometimes wander down there to places they're not supposed to be. But it's best if you forget what you saw, for your own sake." I stared at him, my skin crawling with unease. "What do you mean?" He glanced around as if making sure no one else was listening. "This ship has a history, a long one. Things happen here, things that can't be explained, but it's best not to dig too deep. Some secrets are meant to stay buried." With that, he walked away, leaving me standing there with a cold, sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. I didn't go back below deck for the rest of the cruise, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something down there, something ancient, something hungry, was watching me, waiting. When we finally docked at the end of the 2 weeks, I practically ran off the ship. But even now, as I sit here writing this, I can still hear that heartbeat. Thump, thump, thump. Whatever is down there, it's still alive. When they upgraded me to a luxury suite on the cruise, I thought I had hit the jackpot, until I realized the room was trying to erase me. It was a last-minute decision to take the cruise. I had a week off from work and I needed an escape, something to shake off the stress and monotony of my daily routine. So when I found a discounted ticket for a Caribbean cruise online, I booked it without hesitation. I was supposed to have a small interior cabin, nothing fancy, just a place to sleep in between exploring the ship and lounging by the pool. But when I checked in, the woman at the front desk smiled brightly and said, "You've been upgraded. Congratulations, you'll be staying in one of our luxury suites." I couldn't believe my luck. A luxury suite. I hadn't paid for anything close to that, but I wasn't about to question it. I thanked her and followed the directions to my new room, excitement bubbling inside me. Excitement. When I arrived, I was blown away. The room was massive, especially compared to the cramped cabins I had stayed in on previous cruises. There was a king-size bed, a seating area with plush couches, a flat-screen TV, and even a private balcony overlooking the ocean. It was more than I could have dreamed of. The kind of room celebrities probably stayed in. I settled in, unpacked my bags, and decided to freshen up before dinner. The bathroom was luxurious too, with marble countertops and a deep soaking tub. I was just about to step into the shower when I heard a soft knock at the door. I opened it, expecting to see one of the crew members, but there was no one there. The hallway was empty. I leaned out, peering down both ends of the corridor, but there was no sign of anyone. Weird. I shrugged it off, closed the door, and went back to the bathroom. But the moment I turned on the shower, I heard the knock again. This time louder, more insistent. I wrapped a towel around myself and rushed back to the door. But again, there was no one. Now I was starting to get irritated. Was someone playing a prank on me? Or was there some issue with the door causing it to knock on its own? I checked the hallway once more, and again, it was completely empty. Feeling uneasy, I locked the door, something I don't normally do on a cruise, and went back to the bathroom. But as I stood under the hot water, trying to relax, I couldn't shake the strange feeling that I wasn't alone. After my shower, I dressed and headed to dinner, trying to put the weirdness behind me. The rest of the night was pleasant enough, and I quickly forgot about the strange knocking. By the time I returned to my suite, I was feeling content and a little tipsy from the wine I'd had with dinner. But when I opened the door to my room, the atmosphere inside felt wrong. The air was heavy, thick with something I couldn't quite put into words. It was like walking into a room that had been sealed off for years, the air stale and unmoving. The lights flickered for a second as I stepped inside, and I noticed the temperature had dropped. It was freezing, far colder than it had been when I left. I checked the thermostat, but it was set to a normal temperature. I shrugged it off, telling myself it was just the ship's ventilation system acting up. After all, ships were notorious for their finicky air conditioning. I grabbed an extra blanket from the closet and settled into bed, hoping for a good night's sleep. But sleep didn't come. I woke up in the middle of the night, my heart racing. The room was pitch black, darker than it should have been. Even with the curtains closed, there should have been some light from the hallway or the moon reflecting off the ocean. But there was nothing. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. I reached for the bedside lamp, but when I flicked the switch, nothing happened. The power was out. I groaned and sat up, trying to shake off the lingering sense of dread that clung to me. My phone was on the nightstand, so I grabbed it to use the flashlight. But when I turned it on, the light barely illuminated the room. It was as if the darkness was swallowing the beam, absorbing it into the walls. My heart pounded harder as I swung the light around, scanning the room for anything out of place. And that's when I noticed the door to the closet was open. I distinctly remembered closing it before bed. I hadn't even used the closet except to grab the extra blanket. My mind raced, trying to come up with a logical explanation. Maybe the ship's movement had caused it to creak open. I sat up in bed, frozen, not knowing what to do. The air in the room grew colder, like I was in a freezer. I was going to get up and close the closet door, but before I could get up, I heard the knock again. 3 loud knocks right behind me. I spun around, my breath catching in my throat. There was no one there. The door to the suite was still locked. I was alone, or so I thought. The temperature dropped even further, and I could see my breath fogging in front of me. The walls of the room seemed to shift, like they were closing in, and the darkness pressed down on me from all sides. I needed to get out of there, but when I reached for the door, I realized something horrifying. The door was gone. Where it had been, there was now only a solid wall. I pounded on it, screaming for help, but no sound seemed to escape the room. It was as if the walls were absorbing everything, even my voice. Panic surged through me. I ran to the balcony, thinking I could call for help from outside. But when I opened the curtains, I was met with an impossible sight. The ocean was gone. Beyond the glass was nothing but a black void, stretching endlessly in every direction. There was no horizon, no stars, no reflection of the moon on the water. Just darkness, complete and utter nothingness. I stumbled back, my mind reeling. How was this possible? I had been on a cruise ship in the middle of the ocean, but now it felt like I was trapped in some kind of limbo. The knocks came again, this time from the walls. Louder, more insistent. They echoed all around me as if something was trying to break through the very fabric of the room. And then I saw it. A shape in the corner of the room, barely visible in the dim light from my phone. It was humanoid, but wrong. Its limbs were too long, its body twisted and contorted. It moved toward me, its head tilted at an unnatural angle, and I could hear it whispering something, though I couldn't make out the words. I backed away, my heart hammering in my chest. I was trapped. The door was gone. The balcony led to nowhere. And this thing was coming for me. Suddenly, the power flickered back on. The lights blazed to life, and the room returned to normal. The door reappeared. The balcony once again showed the familiar sight of the ocean, and the temperature returned to a comfortable warmth. But the thing in the corner was still there. I bolted for the door, throwing it open and running down the hallway. I didn't stop until I reached the front desk, gasping for breath, trying to explain what had just happened. The woman behind the desk looked at me with a strange expression, like she'd heard it all before. "You're not the first," she said quietly. "That suite has a history. It's best if we move you to a different room." I didn't argue, I just wanted to get as far away from that room as possible. I never stepped foot in it again. But even now, weeks later, I still feel like part of me never left. It's as if that room is still trying to erase me, bit by bit, until I'm nothing more than a memory, just like the others before me.